Bun găsit, vă spun din nou din Parlamentul European. Sunt Sabina Iosub-Biu, începe chiar acum. De câte ori n-am vorbit în țara noastră despre evaziune fiscală și despre problemele pe care le au multe companii din acest punct de vedere. Cum se poate ocoli legea, dar mai ales cum poate fi legea făcută mai bună, o să vedem în ediția de astăzi. E o discuție la care vă invit să rămâneți în continuare pe Antena 3.
Legea dării în plată a încins spiritele în România. Proiectul a trecut de plenul Senatului și se află acum la Camera Deputaților. Probabilitatea din ce în ce mai mare ca legea dării în plată să fie adoptată îi sperie pe șefii Băncii Naționale a României. Ultima propunere a lor este ca darea în plată să nu fie obligatorie, chiar dacă intră în vigoare.
Ar fi bine ca această lege să fie opțională, adică în esență să fie două ghișee. Un ghișeu, dacă legea devine, desigur, dacă legea se publică în monitor oficial. Un ghișeu la care se duc cei care doresc să ia credit și să beneficieze, să poată beneficia la un moment dat în viitor de darea în plată, și alt ghișeu, și probabil în aceste condiții avansul va fi mai mare, și alt ghișeu la care să se poată duce cei care nu doresc să facă apel la prevederile acestei legi în viitor.
Conform specialiștilor, acest lucru este imposibil în forma actuală a legii.
Dacă vorbim corelarea cu legea dării în plată, în forma actuală în care e ea, acest lucru nu se poate. În forma actuală ar însemna ca legea să fie amendată cu un singur paragraf în care alegerea unui produs cu dare în plată este opțiunea părților.
Și inițiatorii legii spun că ideea viceguvernatorului BNR ar fi ilegală.
Nu este legal, nu se poate face nicio discriminare între consumatori. Consumatorii sunt consumatori, indiferent dacă acceptă sau nu acceptă ideea de dare în plată.
Băncile au anunțat deja că dacă legea intră în vigoare, ar putea cere un avans mult mai mare la creditul pentru casă, ar putea ajunge chiar și la jumătate din valoare. În forma adoptată de Senatul României, proiectul stabilește un prag maxim pentru credit la 150.000 de euro și include și creditele luate prin programul Prima Casă.
Today here with me in the European Parliament are Marisa Matias from Portugal. Thank you for being with me today. And Jill Nina from United Kingdom. Thank you for being with me today. It's an important issue, this one of corporate tax, of taxation in general. We are now facing this new package. What this new package is bringing actually?
I think it's bringing some of the basics, but it's not enough. When we talk about country-by-country reporting, for instance, to let the administrations know about the tax rulings and all the practices within the different countries is very important in terms of transparency. When we talk, for instance, of new schemes to try to fight against tax avoidance is quite important as well. But nevertheless, we are living in a situation that we don't have any more competition amongst multinationals or enterprises, but mainly a competition amongst member states, amongst countries. And I think that that is something that really puts into question a lot of the so-called European values, because there's a huge pressure for instance, for taxpayers when we deal with work or small and medium enterprises, and we have all the freedom when it comes to multinational companies. So I think this is a first step, but for sure not enough, not enough.
The first step is very small, let's say.
Well, it's step by step, but I think it's a very important step that we have taken, which is that, the ordinary people, the citizens of EU are hardworking, they're paying their taxes, and yet we've seen these multinationals, these global companies that have been evading tax on an industrial scale, and they want something done. And frankly, the European Parliament has been arguing for this for a long time, and it has always been very difficult to get the member states to take action to try and ensure that we have a fair system of taxation across the EU. So we don't have one member state pitching itself against another member state and saying, come to my country and you can avoid paying taxes anywhere in the EU. And, you know, we've all heard about IKEA, the Googles, the McDonald's evading taxes where they're making billions and billions of in profits, billions of euros in profits. So the European taxpayer has lost something like 1,000 billion in tax revenues. And frankly, given the scale of the amount we've lost, I think most people feel very angry and they want something done. So thanks to the pressure from the European Parliament, the members of European Parliament, we set up a tax committee to look at, as a result of, you know, the LuxLeaks, so to look at how we can have a fairer system. And as Maria says, you know, we have now suggested country-by-country reporting. It's very important that we can have companies paying taxes where they're actually making the money, because it's so unfair on the people who are buying these products and expecting it to go back, but also unfair on the competition, because the SMEs really struggle because they can't just move and go anywhere else. They have to pay their taxes where, you know, they are based. So they're expecting a greater fairness, greater justice, that the multinationals must comply with the same rules as, you know, an ordinary smaller business has to as well. But for my group, and I represent the S&D, I think we need to go much further. I mean, what we've got is a compromise here. And we need to go further in having greater transparency, not just in country-by-country reporting, but also actually saying, making this information public. Only then will we know if it's fair.
What should you do exactly? Going further, in which sense? What should you do exactly?
I think what we've reported so far is that we should have country-by-country reporting. Mm-hmm. The Commission have come back and said, yes, we need to be doing more in this, but and they have put forward proposals. But I think they do need to go further so that the people know that these companies are paying what they should be paying. So greater transparency, we need that. I think that would be my number one demand, that, you know, we have greater transparency. And there are a number of other things that we could be doing more to ensure there is this idea of CCCTB. That would mean that maybe you have a European-wide tax base and then it's apportioned in different countries where they're making, you know, the profits.
Yeah. How all of these things can be implemented in every country, let's say? How can they be implemented?
They can be implemented if there's political will in order to do it. That's our major problem, because it's not a question of being a kind of natural disaster. No, it's just a question of trying to implement some very rational measures. So it's a question of political will. I don't see it from the side of the Council, I must say. From the side of the European Commission, I see it, as I said, like a baby step, because there are a lot of things which are still there. And even that they are legal, they are totally unfair, and I would say immoral. You can ask year after year, month after month, to regular citizens to pay their taxes, to small and medium enterprises to pay their taxes, to put austerity measures in place all the time, and at the same time, the major companies do their work and make their profits in one country, and they simply can choose and not even pay a regular amount of taxes. That's what's at stake. I don't think...
Whose fault was it?
I think it was everyone's fault. So I don't like to say that it was X or Y fault. We let this system, even having totally...
I would say it's the member states' fault at the end.
But I don't think it's just the member states' fault. I think that is also Commission fault, Parliament fault, in the sense that it was needed to have a situation like LuxLeaks and then SwixLeaks and other situations like these, in order then to us to realize and to take action in something that we already knew, everyone knew. And at the end, what we got was a lot of information, but not that much action. And in fact, I think a lot of the things are still to be dealt with. For instance, we still have to deal with tax havens, and we still have to deal with the fiscal fraud, because if we are talking about tax rulings or something like that, we are not covering fiscal fraud. And there's a lot of money which is lacking in the public administration's accounts, and which is demanded then through austerity measures to those who are the weaker in this game, and this cannot continue like this. So I would say that we were talking about the CCTB, the common corporate tax basis. That's a minimum. But I think we should look to the core of the problems, and with tax havens, with no concrete measures towards fiscal fraud, and which in fact is a crime. I think we can continue, and I'm sure this is better than doing nothing, but we will need a lot of political will in order that the governments can have the face to say, okay, to their citizens, we are dealing with the biggest ones, with the powerful ones, with as much strength as we are dealing with you, because unfortunately, till now, there was a very heavy hand towards the weaker, but so soft when it comes to the most powerful ones.
I would like to discuss with you a little bit about the citizens, because you both said that all the citizens are trying to pay their taxes, and we see how multinationals do in most of the countries. In terms of protecting, let's say, the citizens, in some countries we can see the bankruptcy law, the personal bankruptcy law. Is it a good law? Is it a law that you think leaves space for...
Well, I think, you know, one of the other areas that we're looking at is that part of the Capital Markets Union, that perhaps in some ways we're too strict in relation to bankruptcy laws. When you look at how many new companies start up in the US compared to across Europe, that you don't have as many, and some researchers would say that is down to the stigma attached with bankruptcy within the EU. So if you're a company in USA and you fail, okay, you don't have the same level of stigma. You can actually say, I got it wrong, but I can restart again. And you will not be barred from getting money next time round. Whereas I only know the bankruptcy laws in the UK. I don't know how they are elsewhere. But I think in the UK, you know, you have to go to court, all your possessions and your goods can be used to pay off your debts, and you're on a register. And it really is a big stigma. So this is one of the reasons why the whole solvency issue is going to be looked at as part of the Capital Markets Union legislation. So we hope the Commission is going to come up with a new proposal. It's not about letting people off their debts or creating an easier measure, but we have to recognize that somebody starting up a new company can have a good idea and they can fail. Mm-hmm. And that if they did everything else right and there wasn't an intention to defraud in any way, we should give them a second chance or a third chance. It's not once you've made a mistake, it just prohibits you from starting a new company again.
Not only the companies, not only those who are starting new companies have problems. Individuals have problems also with covering their debts, and they found themselves sometimes in a situation like having no money to pay for their debt. I don't know, for their credit for the house.
Yes, for the house. That's a major problem, I would say, mainly perhaps in the countries which were intervened by the Troika, but as this is a major problem in Spain, a major problem in Greece, in Portugal, and it's unbearable because it's again one situation where there's no risk sharing at all, that when people try to buy their houses, they assume the entire risk of the operation. And the banks never got it. They never have one of the single dimensions of the risk of selling a house. And then people lose their jobs. If they don't lose their jobs, they see huge cuts in their wages, and they cannot afford to pay anymore. What happens in some of the countries is that people, they cannot pay their house, so they cannot afford to have a house anymore, but they still need to continue to pay to the bank.
That happens in Romania, for example. We have a big discussion about this thing, like giving back the house, for example, and ending all your problems.
This is a huge discussion, but in fact, what happens in Romania and Portugal and other countries is that we are trying to change the law in such a way that if you give back your house, if you cannot pay, cannot afford it anymore, but you had a contract with a bank, so the bank never gets any part of the risk. Only the families, they still need to continue to pay it.
How do you handle these things in Portugal?
We are trying to handle in such a way that when people have to give up and not having the house anymore, they immediately can stop to pay a debt of something that they don't have anymore. But I think we should think of this in the other way back. What we need, in fact, is to foster employment and not lowering wages like we have been doing over the last years, as I said, mainly in the peripheral countries, where all the adjustments were done through labor rules and wages, and it were mainly the workers paying the crisis. And of course, then we have outcomes like this one, which is completely unfair and unacceptable, in my opinion.
I think the other issue that is important also is that we have to think of the responsibility of the lenders, that sometimes, you know, and this is what happened in the past, is that there wasn't really proper guidance, that people were just given money without thinking through, can they afford it? Can they afford it in the longer term? And really the problems that are caused when you have really bad lending decisions where clearly it was not in the interest of the person to borrow that much money, you know, high amounts, that they should have gone for something lower. So we do have to look at the responsibility of the lending organizations as well, that they can't just say, well, they shouldn't have borrowed, but they have to make proper judgments, a proper criteria to see, because losing a home is a big thing. It's a big thing for the family. It's a big thing for, you know, the individuals, that they will struggle in future to ever be able to get a loan again. And there are a lot of people who are exploiting this. And it's important that we have, you know, a good framework of legislation to stop people exploiting, because what's happening certainly was the case in UK, that people were borrowing more money against their house, and they were having to pay 100%, 200% in interest rates. So it was just almost impossible for them to do that. So this is where, you know, here in our work on the Economic Affairs Committee, we can look at those and say, look, we also need to make and have responsible lending.
So is it possible, do you think, a discussion at the European level about the banks that should assume part of the risk, that should look better at their the person that are coming to them in order to give them some money?
Absolutely. I think the responsibility is on the lender, and that's why I think at European level there's been quite a lot of legislation to say we need much more responsible lending than just, you know, I mean, it's almost pre the last crash that anybody could go across and borrow however much money, and the banks were just interested in, or there were so many incentives for their employees to lend that actually they didn't look at the cost of that lending to that individual or that organization. It was just about, people meeting their performance targets, and we cannot have that kind of climate. We can't have that sort of criteria that it's not responsible lending. You're not looking at ensuring that the person can successfully repay over a longer period.
Yeah, but we have two different situations. I totally agree with you on the responsibility of the lender. But we also had situations where people simply lost their job. They could pay, they could afford for the house, but they simply lost their job, or they simply saw their lives totally destructed by austerity measures, and so we have different situations. But nevertheless, independently from the situation, there's no responsibility of the lender nor risk sharing with the banks. And we cannot forget that over the last years, especially after 2008, we spent a huge percentage of the European GDP just giving direct money from public accounts to the banking system. And this money didn't get the real economy. And so we are facing, I think, again, a huge risk of having additional problems, additional bubbles, because even that some of the measures were quite positive, then the money didn't reach the real economy. So we have huge amount of liquidity inside the banking system, and the economy is still not recovering. But in any case,
when people have lost their jobs, it's important you have social systems that step in, that give them that time to find somewhere else. Or, it is important that people are maintained in their houses for as long as possible. So it's either the social system or it is part of their sort of redundancy package that they're aware. Certainly, I would expect the social system to pick it up for at least a reasonable length of time so that they're able to find other jobs.
Yeah, but there were major cuts in the social systems and in some of the countries. That's why it became a huger problem, yeah. But I think that amongst ourselves, between socialists and Democrats and the United Left, we would have a lot of things in common that we think should be deepened. Perhaps if with other members of the parliament from other political families, we would have a bigger debate on these issues.
That's correct. Thank you both for being with me today, and let's hope that at the European level some solutions will be found for the persons, for the individuals also. Thank you both for being with me. Iar vouă celor de acasă vă spun să rămâneți pe Antena 3. Ne revedem și săptămâna viitoare la BEU.